Well, hello again, sports fans. This is the latest disaster with my Z84 wing. It actually went missing on a line of sight flight a couple of weeks ago, and this is only the second flight I've made since getting it back. I've been having trouble with the F2S flight controller. Mainly the GPS readings seem to be dropping in and out, which is affecting all of the autonomous modes. But I think I fixed that for this flight. I noticed just before the launch that one of the aileron servos is bugging. It seems to be functioning okay though, so I just assume it's something to do with the flight controller and go ahead and launch anyway. The video is coming from a Mobius camera on the nose, and the insert is showing the view I'm getting from the on-screen display on the monitor. I'm launching in manual mode, and I've got the throws for the aileron set at 100%, and it's really quite twitchy and difficult to fly in manual mode, but I don't want to switch it into one of the autonomous modes until I get enough altitude to respond in case something goes wrong. I'm not sure what that little glitch in the motor was, so I think I've got enough altitude to switch it into balance mode and everything becomes a lot smoother. I'd noticed on the previous flight that I didn't have a lot of right hand aileron authority when I was flying in balance mode, or in any of the autonomous modes for that matter. So after landing, I went into the F2S menu and increased the aileron gains by about 15%, and that's what I'm testing here. It certainly seems to have helped, and I'm confident enough to actually come down a bit closer to the ground and do some lowish passes around the field. So I do a few right hand turns quite tight and quite low just to make sure everything's okay, and it certainly seems to be. So I'm pretty happy with the way that balance mode's now working, and decide to head out a little bit further and test the heading altitude hold mode. The icon for the hold mode display only changes slightly from the balance mode, with bars appearing on the end of the arrows. These bars appear or disappear in response to any aileron or elevator input you might make while flying in this mode. Before going out much further, I switch it into return to home to make sure that that's working as well. And she turns around promptly and seems to settle on a course straight back to our dam, so it's looking good. I've set the home altitude at 100 metres, and it seems to climb up to that on the way home. It does seem to fly past the home point a fair bit before it makes its first turn, and that turn's quite violent. After that it seems to settle into a fairly stable, roughly circular pattern around the home point. I'm pretty pleased to see that it's doing right hand circles with no apparent problem at all. So I'm fairly confident that everything's working as it should be, and I put it back in balance mode with the intention of flying out a little bit to the valley to the northwest and seeing what sort of range I have with my new lithium ion pack. To fly any distance down this valley I need at least 200 metres of altitude to be sure of getting a video signal back past the hill next to the field. So I head out to the west and start climbing up to that 200 metres, and I have a bit of a mess around with the throttle and the pitch angle, trying to make sure that I stay well down below the 10 amps and don't put too much stress on the batteries. So I think I actually get up to about 250 metres before I turn down to the valley and put it into heading hold mode and sit back and relax. Unfortunately, it's not long before it becomes apparent that it's drifting off the heading to the left. I increase the throttle just in case that's the problem, but it doesn't seem to help, and I'm heading directly for the ridge, so I decide I'll just put it back in a return to home while I think about what to do next. So she seems to be happily lined up on a homeward heading, no problem with the altitude, so I'm thinking maybe it must be that I just didn't have enough throttle, so I decide I'll switch it back into heading hold mode and fly it back around towards the heading I want, which is the middle of that valley, and let the sticks go and settle back on a heading again. So once again she starts drifting over to the left, and I need to put in some right aileron to bring her back to the middle, let go of the sticks, and she's on track for a little while, but then the cycle starts again and she's drifting off to the left once more. So she's just coming up on the 4 kilometre mark when I notice the failsafe kicks in briefly and she goes into return to home and then drops back into heading hold mode. So I figure that the problem is that at this distance from home I don't have enough altitude to get a signal past the hill at the northern end of our strip, so I decide it's time to turn around and head back. So once again I don't seem to have any real trouble doing a right hand turn in balance mode, and I bring around and line her up with the hill at the northern end of our strip, which is on the left hand side of the valley in the extreme distance. I noticed that the video is starting to get a bit grainy, so I think I'll slip it into return to home mode so that it can look after itself while I have a mess around with the antenna. Rotating the antenna doesn't seem to be helping, and the video continues to degenerate. Even more concerning is that from the flashes I'm getting, it seems to be drifting left off the home heading, so the same as it was doing in heading hold mode. It's about this time that I realise that in return to home mode the plane's going to descend to 100 metres, and that's probably what's caused the loss of video signal. Of course at this stage, without any video, there's nothing I can do about it apart from cross my fingers and hope that the video comes back when it gets closer to home. The onboard video shows that from this point the plane started executing a number of large left-hand circles. But without the benefit of the data from the on-screen display, I can only speculate as to what was actually going on. It looks like the flight controller is trying to maintain a home heading, but isn't able to make significant right-hand corrections. I'm now pretty sure that this problem's related to that dodgy right-hand servo rather than the flight controller gains. What seems to be happening is that without any right-hand aileron authority, the left-hand drift I was observing earlier gradually gets worse and worse until at some point the flight controller decides that the correction is now to the left rather than the right, and it brings the plane round in a complete 360-degree circle back onto the heading again, and then the cycle starts over. By the way, that annoying beeping is coming from a PPM to PWM converter. That's letting me know it hasn't had any control input for a while. So in this speeded up section, it's pretty easy to see how much of a struggle the flight controllers are having to keep the plane in the air and this final 360-degree circle it executes. Meanwhile, back at the base station, I'm wondering what's going on. The brief flashes I'm getting on the monitor show that it's still in the air, but it should be well and truly home by now. And then all of a sudden I get some absolutely clear video. It doesn't really help that much though. I can see that I'm approaching the river, but I'm not sure exactly where. I notice that the wings are rocking backwards and forwards a lot, but the base station doesn't have audio, so I'm not hearing all of the corresponding throttle changes. You can also hear the no signal alarm still sounding, so it's clear that I haven't input a command for some time. So things start to get really interesting from this point. The motor RPM drops dramatically and the no signal alarm stops sounding, which tells me that it's responded to a command change from the transmitter, which I'm pretty sure was to take it out of return to home and put it in balance mode. It looks like it went back into fail-safe return to home almost straight away though. The video signal keeps dropping in and out, but it seems to be improving. I can see enough to be fairly confident that I am travelling along the river towards home. And as the video reception improves, I can start seeing some of the telemetry on the OSD and come up with a theory as to what's actually going on. So the first thing I notice is that the distance to home keeps dropping out. And this leads me to check the number of GPS satellites that are being tracked, and this is also jumping up and down. So it looks like my old GPS problems have come back to bite me on the bum. So what's happening is that I've dropped into a radio shadow behind the ridges to the north of the field, and the receiver has gone into failsafe, which has put the flight controller into return to home mode. When the controller loses the GPS signal, it can no longer tell where home is, so it seems to take it out of return to home mode and put it back into balance mode. Then when the GPS comes good again, it tries to go back into return to home mode. And the cycle continues. Given that it's also got a broken wing from that dodgy servo, it's a miracle the thing's still up in the air at all. I've got a pretty good idea of where I am now, and I've rotated the main part of my video antenna array to the north, which has improved the video signal dramatically. So at this point I take it out of return to home mode and into balance mode, and things immediately calm down. The F2S has been set up to maintain a minimum return to home throttle setting of 60%. When I switch to balance mode, the throttle setting is taken from the throttle stick position on the transmitter, which at the moment is at 28%, and with the battery in its depleted condition, that's just not enough to maintain flying speed. So she starts to become unstable and lose altitude. By the time I figure out what's going on and increase the throttle, it's just too late. I lose too much altitude and drop down below the video signal and blind once again. All I can do is switch it back into return to home mode and cross my fingers again. So from this point on, apart from the occasional brief flash, the video gives up completely. If I hadn't found the crash site, I never would have seen this onboard video, which turns out to be quite exciting. She's low to the ground with a flat battery in return to home mode with a dodgy GPS unit and a dodgy aileron servo. I don't know how the Z84 missed this tree, but I was able to retrieve a single frame of it from the transmitted video, and that was ultimately what allowed me to locate the crash site. Not far to go now. Just remember that there's nobody but the flight controller flying this plane. It's pretty amazing. You'd swear there was some sort of collision avoidance system operating, but I can assure you there isn't, and here comes the evidence of that. So this is the single frame of video of the tree I was able to retrieve. And this much grainier one from 7 or 8 seconds later, which shows the plane still in the air heading south still. So there's the bridge and the river. So the last GPS is telling me I'm about 350 metres over that way. There are trees over there which seem to match up with the last frame that I have, so walkies time. So we're where the last GPS coordinates were, and from what I can see from the video, we flew south from there till we hit, or came close to hitting a dead tree, which maybe that one there. The last frame shows only 2 trees in it, and that could be them, so that's where I'm heading. So I think that is the tree, and we're heading south from there, so let's give it a shot. So this is 400 metres past the last GPS coordinates and about 200 metres past the tree in the last frame. I suspect if the plane had got this far, I would have had my video signal return. So I guess this is as far south as I'm going to look. Must be somewhere along this line. It was, but I didn't find it. So I went back to the truck and fired up the quadcopter. In addition to the forward-facing flight camera, I've installed a downward-facing Mobius that's recording high-definition video, so I don't expect to see it on the in-flight video, but I hope to be able to analyse the Mobius footage when I get home and maybe spot it. It takes me a little while to get my bearings, but I eventually spot the dead tree that I've used as my reference point and start following a course south from there. The insert is the footage from the Mobius camera from this point on. So I remember seeing that small dam up ahead on my foot search, and I'm pretty sure I walked around to the right hand side of it, so I decided I'll fly out over the left hand side this time. I walked on for another 100 metres or so till I came to another dam and didn't spot anything in the air, but when I got home and analysed the video, lo and behold, as I'm passing just to the left of that first dam, I spot a flash of orange at the base of that dead tree. So the search continues out till the next dam, at which point I turn around and come back. But something very interesting happens just after I've passed over that dead tree. For some reason the Venture does a complete roll and drops from 60 metres down to about 30. At the time I thought I must have hit a power line or a tree, but at 60 metres there's just nothing up there. Nothing like that's ever happened to me before, so maybe it was just celebrating flying over the Z84. So I spent about another 10 minutes flying a bit of a grid over the area and capturing as much video as I can for later analysis before heading back to the truck. I must admit that I was a little disappointed that I hadn't actually spotted anything on the flight camera. I thought I might have been a chance of spotting a glimpse of the bright orange wings of the Z84, but it was not to be. Even after watching the video twice when I got home, I still didn't spot this frame until I went through a frame by frame slow motion analysis. But needless to say, I was very pleased when I did, and even more pleased when I went to the GPS coordinates and picked it up. I must have passed within 30 feet of it when I walked past that dam, but it was on the wrong side of the tree trunk, and that grass it was in is quite long. There's definitely some advantages in having an aerial search capability. So this has been a fairly epic video. But there's just so much that happened in it that I didn't feel comfortable about leaving it out, and I really don't want to forget the lessons that I hopefully have learned from this particular exercise. So well done you if you've managed to stick it out this far, and hopefully you've managed to get something out of it as well.